When you think about a crime scene, your mind probably goes straight to a very specific, um, almost cinematic set of
Oh,
images.
yeah, absolutely. Like something straight out of a movie.
Right. You picture the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. You imagine the harsh glare of those portable floodlights cutting through the dark and, that unmistakable bright yellow police tape sectioning off a piece of the everyday world.
It is a highly dramatic tableau. I mean, it's loud, it's chaotic, and it completely demands your attention.
But the reality is, by the time we actually hear about what happened, all of that visceral drama has almost always been, well, it's been distilled down. It turns into a few dry, heavily sanitized bureaucratic sentences in a police blotter.
Exactly. And we just scroll past these updates on our phones while we're, waiting in line for coffee.
We maybe skim the headline and we rarely give it a second thought, but what if you actually took the time to step behind that yellow tape? What if you approached a standard police press release not just as a quick update to be consumed and forgotten, but as a dense, heavily coded text?
Because that text holds an incredible amount of hidden structural information about the world around you. Treating these reports as coded texts, um, it really changes everything about how you consume local news.
It really does.
We are so heavily conditioned by the 24-hour news cycle to just scan for the big sensational keywords. We see the word drugs, we see guns, we see arrest.
And we immediately feel this false sense of comprehension, right? Like we think we understand the whole story just from those buzzwords.
We do. But a police report, or even a seemingly brief social media update from a local department, is drafted with a highly specific, almost surgical precision. Every single detail is deliberately chosen and placed.
So it's not just random bureaucratic filler.
Not at all. The specific investigated units that are listed, the exact two-liagram quantities of what was seized, the specific makes and models of the hardware found, and perhaps most importantly, the precise statutory wording of the legal charges.
It all forms a breadcrumb trail, basically.
Exactly. If you understand the mechanics behind those words, you can reverse engineer a phenomenally complex, chaotic reality from just 3 or 4 paragraphs of prose.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are taking you with us into the mechanics of a localized but highly coordinated law enforcement operation in Waterbury, Connecticut.
It's a fascinating case study to really unpack.
It really is. We have a single primary source today, supplemented by some deep research into the underlying mechanics of what it describes. The source is a concise, densely packed news report derived from a Waterbury Police Department release.
And it details a Tuesday raid at a residence on Woodlawn Terrace, targeting a 38-year-old local resident named Caliph Blake.
Right, so our goal here is to unpack the entire anatomy of this bust. We're going to look closely at the specific units involved, inventory the seized contraband, analyze a surprisingly varied arsenal of weapons, and then, translate all of those physical objects into the severe matrix of legal charges that followed.
It's going to be a heavy analytical lift, but it's so revealing.
Right, let's unpack this, starting with the logistical nightmare of the raid itself. The report lists the law enforcement agencies involved, and initially, it reads like an absolute overwhelming show of force.
It really is an Avengers Assemble moment for local law enforcement.
That's exactly what I thought. We're talking about the Waterbury Police Department's Vice and Intelligence Unit, their Gang Task Force, the Detective Bureau, and the Connecticut State Police Violent Crime Task Force.
It is a massive deployment of state and local power. And recognizing the sheer scale of that deployment is, well, it's the first major key to decoding this event.
Because law enforcement resources are highly finite.
Oh, absolutely. Task forces, particularly those that cross jurisdictional lines, like involving the state police, they are incredibly expensive and logistically burdensome to run. A department does not mobilize 4 distinct, highly specialized investigative units to just serve a standard warrant.
Right, and I have to push back a little on the initial read of this because it's easy to look at that list and just think, well, they want it to be safe.
Sure, that's the common assumption.
But I was looking into how these task forces are structured, and it is a bureaucratic maze to get them all to cooperate. Why would one 38-year-old individual, a single residence, and a few cars require the combined specialized firepower of Vice, Intelligence, gang units, and the State Police Violent Crime Task Force?
It's a great question.
Isn't that an incredibly unusual amount of resources to deploy all at once for what ostensibly looks like a local drug bust?
It is highly unusual, and that anomaly points to a massive underlying intelligence operation. To understand the why of it, we really have to break down the specific mechanical function of each of these units.
So this isn't just a list of names for a press release.
No, it's literally a blueprint of the investigation's history. Let's look at vice and intelligence first. In the context of modern policing, intelligence means this operation began months before that Tuesday morning raid.
Because intelligence units don't just, answer radio calls for service, right?
Exactly. They operate entirely in the background. They are gathering raw data. They're utilizing pen registers to track phone communications, maybe installing pole cameras to monitor foot traffic at the Woodlawn Terrace location.
Oh, wow. So they're basically building a database on this specific house.
Yes, they are cultivating confidential informants and executing controlled narcotics purchases over a long period. The fact that they are listed as a primary agency means they built the foundational architecture of this case.
I found it fascinating when I was reading through our notes on standard police operating procedures that intelligence units are fundamentally about data aggregation. They aren't kicking down doors initially.
Right, they are building a massive spreadsheet of human behavior.
But then you inject the gang task force into that equation. What changes when they get involved? Because that seems like a major escalation.
The scope of the entire target changes. If vice and intelligence are looking at the transactions, the gang task force is looking at the network.
So it's moving from the micro to the macro.
Exactly. Their presence implies that the intelligence gathered didn't just point to an isolated freelance individual selling contraband. It suggests the data revealed connections to a larger structured network.
Because gang task forces specialize in mapping out relationships and hierarchies, right?
Yes, hierarchies, supply chains, territorial boundaries. If they are brought into the operational fold, it means law enforcement believes this specific residence on Woodlawn Terrace was functioning as a critical node in a much larger organized structure.
So they aren't just taking down a corner retailer, they are attempting to disrupt a major supply line.
Precisely. Which brings us to the unit that I found, well, the most perplexing, honestly, the Connecticut State Police Violent Crime Task Force.
Yeah, Waterbury is a major city. They have their own tactical units, their own SWAT equivalent. Why go through the mystical hurdle of bringing in the state police?
And specifically the Violent Crime Division of the State Police.
Right, why do that?
That specific inclusion alters our entire understanding of the threat matrix for this raid. Local commanders will request state police involvement for a couple of reasons, sometimes jurisdictional. But a violent crime task force designation is entirely about threat assessment.
So they knew something dangerous was waiting for them.
It tells us that during the operational briefing when commanders were looking at the blueprints of the house and all those intelligence files we talked about, they concluded there was an exceptionally high probability of heavily armed resistance.
Which means the intelligence probably indicated the presence of heavy weaponry or maybe reinforced doors.
Or that the target had a documented history of significant violence. You do not absorb the cost and the sheer complexity of integrating a state police tactical element unless you are mathematically anticipating a highly dangerous, potentially volatile breach.
And the complexity of that breach is something I really want to dig into because there's a logistical detail in the report that is so easy to gloss over. They didn't just hit the residence.
No, they hit multiple targets.
Right. The warrants they executed were for the Woodlawn Terrace residence, the suspect himself, and 3 specific vehicles. When I read that, I tried to imagine the actual mechanics of it.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Coordinating a tactical raid on a single structure is hard enough, but hitting 3 cars simultaneously, how is that mechanically achieved without tipping off the target?
The synchronization required is staggering. Think about the physical reality of serving warrants on 3 mobile assets and a fixed structure all at the same time.
Because those vehicles might not be neatly parked in the driveway.
Right. In fact, standard operational security for illicit businesses dictates they absolutely shouldn't be. One might be parked 3 blocks away. One might be actively moving through city traffic.
So they have to track all of these moving pieces in real time.
Yes. To execute this, the surveillance teams must maintain uninterrupted, undetected visual contact on all 3 vehicles and the house simultaneously. They have to establish a perimeter and coordinate via encrypted radio channels.
Just waiting for the precise moment.
Exactly then. They wait for the moment when the target is in a highly controllable, isolated position. And then they initiate a synchronized breach across potentially 4 different geographic points at the exact same second.
Because the margin for error is literally 0. If you breach the house, but one of those cars is sitting at a gas station across town, and the driver gets a text message about the raid, that car and everything inside it just vanishes into the wind.
It's gone. And that brings us to the operational purpose of those vehicles. In the architecture of the illicit economy, a vehicle is very rarely utilized merely for transportation.
What are they used for then?
They function as mobile decentralized storage units. We call them stash cars in the industry. The operational logic is pretty simple. You keep the bulk of your narcotics inventory or your cash reserves in a vehicle registered to a third party parked several streets away.
Oh, I see. That creates a layer of plausible deniability.
Exactly. It ensures that if law enforcement does execute a warrant on your primary residence, they only seize the working inventory, not your main capital reserves.
But by securing warrants for 3 specific vehicles, the investigating agencies are totally showing their hand.
They are demonstrating that their months of intelligence gathering successfully mapped the entire logistical footprint of this operation. They weren't just hitting the storefront.
They were simultaneously taking down the warehouse and the logistics fleet all at once.
Precisely.
Which sets us up perfectly to examine what all that synchronized effort actually yielded. Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's transition from the mechanics in the raid to the actual commerce of contraband they found inside.
The inventory is fascinating.
When you deploy that level of state power, you are expecting a significant return, and the inventory here is highly revealing. The report lists the seizure of 77 fentanyl pills, 100 grams of crack cocaine, and an incredibly specific $6,777 in cash.
That exact number is so important.
I want to start with the economics of that cash number.
Yep.
If you or I have roughly $7,000, it's digital. It's sitting in a checking account somewhere.
Right, it's just numbers on a screen.
Or if for some reason we have it in physical cash, it's probably banded in crisp $100 bills from a bank teller. But $6,777. What does the granular mechanics of that specific messy ratio tell us about this business?
Well, that number is a perfect frozen snapshot of an active, breathing, street-level distribution hub. The specificity of the number, the $7 at the end, tells you this isn't capital that's been aggregated and prepared for upstream transit.
It's not bundled up, ready to be given to a supplier.
Exactly. This is the literal day-to-day cash flow of a high-volume, low-margin retail operation.
I was reading about how these microeconomies function, and it struck me that this is essentially the cash register at the end of a very busy shift.
Yeah.
You are dealing with crumpled $20 bills, 10s, 5s, and a massive amount of singles.
Oh, the physical volume of $6,777 in street denominations is actually quite large. It's heavy.
Right. It requires counting, sorting, and eventually some mechanism to legitimize it.
And the physical burden of the cash is actually a major vulnerability in these operations. The fact that it was seized in this raw, unaggregated state tells us that transactions were actively ongoing, likely right up until the perimeter was secured.
The money hasn't entered any phase of the laundering cycle yet.
No, it hasn't been consolidated into larger denominations to pay wholesale suppliers. It represents raw, untaxed revenue, and its presence in that exact odd amount indicates a highly fluid, constant stream of customer traffic.
And when we look at what was generating that revenue, we see it in the narcotics inventory. This is where I want you to consider how illicit businesses really mirror legitimate corporate strategies.
They absolutely do.
If you own a convenience store, you don't just sell one brand of soda. You diversify your product lines to capture different demographics and maximize your customer base. We see that exact macroeconomic principle illustrated right here in this seizure.
The product diversification is key here.
We have 77 fentanyl pills and 100 grams of crack cocaine. From a logistical and chemical standpoint, these are completely different universes of product, right?
They are fundamentally different models of commerce. And their co-location here really maps out the complex modern landscape of the narcotics trade. If we analyze the fentanyl first, 77 pills.
Right. It's a very specific form factor.
Fentanyl that has been pressed into pill form is the hallmark of the modern, highly synthetic, globalized drug market. From a supply chain perspective, it is a miracle of illicit efficiency.
Because it's entirely lab-created. You don't need agricultural land. You don't need sunlight or rain.
No, you just need precursor chemicals, which are often shipped globally in industrial quantities, and a pill press. That's the terrifying mechanical reality of it.
It requires absolutely no agricultural footprint.
Furthermore, pressing it into pills often mimics legitimate pharmaceutical branding like oxycodone or Xanax. This targets a very specific consumer base, often individuals battling opioid use disorder who are seeking a potent synthetic depressant.
But physically, the logistics are incredibly compact, aren't they?
Very compact. Fentanyl is active in microgram quantities. 77 pills represent a substantial amount of lethal potential, yet physically, they could easily fit inside a standard prescription bottle hidden in a coat pocket.
So the profit margins are astronomical compared to the physical space the inventory actually occupies.
Astronomical. But then sitting in the exact same environment as this hyper-efficient modern synthetic powder, you have 100 grams of crack cocaine.
When I was looking into the manufacturing processes, crack felt almost like a mechanical throwback compared to fentanyl. It just seems so labor-intensive.
It is. It operates on a completely different logistical paradigm. Crack cocaine is deeply tied to a more traditional organic supply chain. It requires the coca plant, international smuggling of powder cocaine hydrochloride, and then, crucially, a local manufacturing process.
Because you cannot easily import crack cocaine in bulk, right? It degrades over time.
Exactly, it degrades. It requires an operator to take the powder, chemically alter it using a base like baking soda and heat, and produce the physical freebase rocks locally.
So it requires a kitchen, it requires time, and it produces a distinct chemical odor. Plus, 100 grams is not a minor amount. That is not someone's personal weekend supply.
Oh no, 100 grams is absolutely a distribution level weight. It indicates this location wasn't just a retail point, it was likely a processing center.
Yeah, so they were manufacturing right there on site.
Yes. And crack serves a completely different physiological dependency and a different demographic than synthetic opioids. It is a potent stimulant, whereas fentanyl is a depressant.
By carrying both, this operation was catering to two divergent streams of the underground economy simultaneously.
It's a localized, vertically integrated business.
But here is the friction point I kept coming back to in my notes. Whenever you have that much volatility, two completely different consumer demographics crossing paths, the raw physical bulk of local crack production sitting next to the microdosed reality of synthetic fentanyl and nearly $7 grand in loose cash.
The powder keg.
You immediately generate a catastrophic security problem. You are basically operating an unregulated high-volume bank and pharmacy out of a residential structure.
And you cannot call the police if a rival organization decides they want your inventory.
Exactly. You are forced to establish your own localized monopoly on violence.
The necessity of violence, or at least the credible threat of it, is structurally built into the economics of the space.
Yeah.
You have no legal recourse to protect your capital.
Therefore, you must invest in your own defense infrastructure.
And that brings us to the second half of this seizure, which is perhaps the most analytically rich portion of the entire report.
The arsenal, the drugs and the money were just the capital. The firearms were the infrastructure protecting it.
And it's quite an infrastructure.
The report details a highly specific inventory of exactly 4 firearms. We have a Ruger LCP .380 pistol, a high-standard Field King FK101.22 pistol, a Smith & Wesson M&P .45 caliber pistol, and an Aero Precision Atlas R1 9mm rifle.
It is a highly curated list.
When I started researching the mechanical specifications of these 4 weapons, I realized this wasn't just a random pile of guns. The analogy I kept coming back to is a golfer's bag.
That's a really good way to frame it.
Because a golfer doesn't carry 14 of the exact same club. They carry a driver for maximum distance, a wedge for escaping a bunker, a putter for the precise work on the green. Every single tool is engineered for a drastically different physical scenario.
That is exactly what this collection of firearms represents. It is a highly curated, mechanically diverse toolkit. Analyzing the mechanical properties of these firearms gives us a direct window into the psychological and tactical threat matrix of the operators.
Okay, let's pull these tools out of the bag and examine their specific engineering, starting with the Ruger LCP .3A. I looked up the schematics for the LCP. It stands for Lightweight Compact Pistol.
Yes, its entire design philosophy is built around being virtually invisible. It is the definition of a subcompact pocket pistol.
So what does that mean for how it's actually used?
The mechanics of this gun dictate its use case. It has an incredibly short barrel, which means low ballistic velocity and terrible accuracy at a distance. It utilizes a .380 caliber round, which is smaller and carries significantly less kinetic energy than a standard 9mm.
Right, and it also features a really long, heavy trigger pull, doesn't it?
It does. It has a heavy double-action-only trigger pull to prevent accidental discharge while being carried loosely. This weapon is not engineered to defend a fortified position. Its sole purpose is deep concealment.
So this is the firearm you slip into the pocket of your gym shorts when you walk out to the street corner to make a quick transaction?
Exactly. It is designed for extreme close quarters, immediate reactionary defense. It is the gun you rely on when operational security demands that no one knows you are armed.
It's the concealed last resort option. It's for when a deal goes bad at arm's length. But contrast that engineering with the next weapon on the inventory, the Smith & Wesson M&P .45 caliber
Oh,
pistol.
this is a totally different ballistic reality. The mechanical contrast is absolute. M&P stands for military and police.
So this is meant to be seen.
Yes, this is a full-sized, heavy-duty service weapon designed for open carry and a retention holster. Let's look at the ballistics. The .45 ACP round is massive. It moves slower than a 9mm, but its sheer mass transfers a devastating amount of kinetic energy upon impact.
It is historically renowned for its stopping power, right?
Absolutely. Furthermore, the physical gun is heavier, which mitigates recoil, and it features a longer sight radius for better accuracy. If the Ruger is designed to be hidden in a pocket, the Smith & Wesson is the weapon sitting overtly on the coffee table.
It is the primary defensive tool for an anticipated frontal confrontation.
It is your workhorse defense weapon.
So we have the concealed pocket pistol and the overt duty sidearm. That covers standard handgun defense. But the third weapon represents a massive escalation in force. They seized an Aero Precision Atlas R1 9mm rifle.
This is where the threat matrix changes completely.
Now, I want to clarify this because it can be confusing for people who don't follow firearms. It fires a 9mm bullet, which is a handgun round, but it is built on an AR-style rifle platform.
Right in the tactical community, this is known as a pistol caliber carbine, or PCC.
So what does introducing a rifle platform into a residential space actually change about the mechanics of a potential gunfight?
It alters the physics and the psychology of the engagement completely. Even though it is firing the same caliber projectile as many handguns, the platform itself is a force multiplier.
How so? Like, what makes the platform better than just a 9mm pistol?
An AR-style platform gives the operator multiple points of physical contact. You have the shoulder stock, the pistol grip, and the forward handguard. This ergonomic stability allows for incredibly rapid, highly accurate follow-up shots that are mechanically impossible with a traditional handgun.
Oh, I see. And because the barrel is longer, that changes the bullet's physics, too.
Exactly. The longer barrel increases the velocity of the 9mm round, flattening its trajectory and increasing its terminal effectiveness.
And from a capacity standpoint, these platforms commonly accept extended magazines holding 30 or more rounds, don't they?
Yes, they do. The introduction of this platform shifts the posture from mere self-defense to active area denial. In a close-quarters residential environment, a PCC represents a staggering volume of sustained, accurate fire.
Wow. So its presence indicates that the operators are not merely preparing for a low-level robbery.
Not at all. They were tactically equipping themselves to repel a coordinated assault. When you recall that the State Police Violent Crime Task Force was deployed for this raid, the presence of the Aero Precision completely validates their threat assessment.
Because law enforcement intelligence knew they were potentially walking into a tactically fortified environment capable of delivering overwhelming suppressive fire.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates the arms race that occurs in these illicit economies.
But here is where the golf bag analogy hits a bizarre snag. We have 3 modern, tactically specific weapons, and then we have the fourth gun, a high standard Field King FK 101.22 pistol.
This one is just so fascinating.
When I researched this specific model, it completely threw me. What on earth is this weapon doing in a fortified drug distribution hub?
What's fascinating here is the sheer historical dissonance of this firearm. If the other 3 weapons represent modern tactical doctrine, the High Standard is an artifact.
It's basically an antique.
It is.
Yeah.
High Standard was a highly respected manufacturing company actually based right here in Connecticut for much of its history. They were famous in the mid-20th century for producing exquisitely machined, exceptionally accurate .22 caliber target pistols.
So these were the instruments used by competitive marksmen and Olympic shooters.
Exactly. It's not a weapon of war or a tool built for the drug trade. It's a precision sporting instrument.
It fires a .22 caliber round, which is tiny, low recoil, and generally used for plinking at paper targets or hunting very small game.
Its presence alongside a modern AR-style platform and synthetic fentanyl is a jarring mechanical contradiction. And it opens up a massive analytical window into how the black market for firearms actually operates.
It forces us to ask about the life cycle of this specific object. Like, how does a mid-century finely crafted target pistol end up on a table next to 100 grams of crack cocaine?
It's a great question, because firearms rarely enter the illicit market directly. It's often a long, meandering path of theft and bartering. This weapon could have been stolen in a residential burglary decades ago, maybe taken from the estate of a deceased collector.
Right. And once it enters the underground economy, its original sporting purpose is totally erased.
Completely erased.
Sure.
In the illicit market, a firearm is simply a fungible commodity. It holds intrinsic value. It can be traded for narcotics, used to settle debts, or simply hoarded as a final layer of armed redundancy.
But seeing this vintage precision instrument listed in the same inventory as the Aero Precision Rifle, it just perfectly highlights the chaotic, scavenging, highly unregulated nature of how these domestic arsenals are actually compiled.
It's like finding a vintage pocket watch in the middle of a modern server farm. It just doesn't belong, but it tells the story of how things accumulate.
And finding these objects, the fentanyl, the crack, the massive amount of loose cash, this highly specific multi-generational arsenal, finding them is only the first mechanical step.
This is just the beginning of the process.
Translating that raw physical evidence into the rigid codified machinery of the criminal justice system is a completely different, incredibly complex process. The specific ways these items were stored, the exact combinations of what was found, form the precise blueprint for the legal fallout that Caliph Blake is now facing.
The legal charges appended to the end of a police report are arguably the most analytical layer of the entire document.
I found them to be the most revealing part of the whole source text.
They force us to transition from looking at a list of items to reconstructing the physical environment where those items existed. The legal code isn't just punitive, it is deeply descriptive. It rebuilds the crime scene for the legal record.
And as I was reading through the final paragraph of the report, one specific detail in the charges absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Let's read the matrix of charges Blake is facing. 2 counts of risk of injury to a minor, 4 counts of unlawful storage of a firearm, 3 counts of criminal possession of a pistol or revolver, 4 counts of illegal sale or transfer of a firearm.
It's a heavy list.
Possession of narcotics with intent to sell, criminal possession of a firearm or ammunition, and possession of a ½ ounce or more of cocaine in freebase form. Okay, let's pause immediately. 2 counts of risk of injury to a minor.
It's a shocking detail to find at the very end.
The entire narrative portion of this report, all the paragraphs detailing the task forces, the breach, the drugs, the guns, it contained absolutely zero mention of children being present. So what does this actually mean? How does this charge materialize out of nowhere?
Well, this highlights the immense value of reading the legal charges forensically. The narrative summary provided by the police blotter deliberately omitted the presence of children, which is standard procedure designed to protect the privacy of minors involved in traumatic events.
That makes sense. They want to shield the kids from the public eye.
However, the legal statutes demand absolute accuracy regarding liability. The charge of risk of injury to a minor in the context of a major narcotics and weapons raid is devastatingly revealing.
Because it provides the unseen reality of the operation.
It tells us unequivocally that children, and specifically 2 children given the 2 distinct counts, were either physically in the home during the tactical breach or that they resided there and had unrestricted access to the spaces where the contraband was stored.
Which fundamentally rewrites the entire visual we've been constructing. We were analyzing tactical deployments, stash cars, and area denial weaponry, and suddenly the legal code forces us to realize there were likely children's toys sitting on the floor inches away from 77 microdosed fentanyl pills.
It dramatically alters the sociological and tragic severity of the scene. The law recognizes that this wasn't merely a sterile commercial warehouse used for illicit logistics.
It was a domestic space. It was a home.
Yes, it was a home that had been thoroughly and dangerously compromised. In legal terms, leaving loaded tactical firearms or highly lethal synthetic opioids in an environment accessible to children elevates the criminality from standard possession to active reckless endangerment. The law quantifies the unseen victims.
And that concept of the law quantifying reality continues when you analyze how the firearms are charged. I want to trace the math on this because it maps perfectly back to our breakdown of the arsenal, but it reveals new details about the home itself.
The math on the gun charges is so precise.
They seized exactly 4 guns. Now look at the charges. 4 counts of unlawful storage of a firearm. The math is a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. I looked up Connecticut's specific statutes on this, and they are incredibly strict regarding safe storage.
They are very strict, and this charge reconstructs the physical placement of the weapons.
Yeah.
In many jurisdictions, but particularly in Connecticut, if you possess a loaded firearm in a premises where a minor could reasonably gain access to it, and that firearm is not secured in a locked box or rendered inoperable by a trigger lock, you have committed a distinct crime.
So the fact that prosecutors levied 4 separate counts means none of them were locked up.
Exactly. It means that not a single one of those 4 weapons, not the pocket pistol, the duty gun, the target pistol, or the rifle, was secured. They were out in the open.
They were just tucked under mattresses or sitting on kitchen counters or left on coffee tables.
They were completely integrated into the accessible fabric of the house.
And the mathematical consistency applies to another charge, too. 4 counts of illegal sale or transfer of a firearm. When I first read transfer, I assumed it meant he was actively caught trying to sell all 4 guns when the police breached the door.
That's what most people assume when they hear that word.
But looking into the legal definition of transfer, it's much broader than that, isn't it?
It is a critical distinction in the law. Transfer does not necessarily imply an outbound sale. In the context of strict state firearms laws, a transfer simply means the mechanism by which the weapon changed hands.
So if a firearm is acquired outside of the legally mandated state-regulated background check system, that counts?
Right. For instance, if it is bought out of the trunk of a car, traded for narcotics, or acquired by someone who is statutorily prohibited from owning one, the mere act of taking physical possession is classified as an illegal transfer.
So again, we see 4 guns found and 4 counts applied.
This legally documents that the entire curated arsenal, from the modern AR platform to the vintage high standard, was sourced entirely from the unregulated black market.
But amidst all this perfect math, 4 guns, 4 storage charges, 4 transfer charges, there is a highly specific discrepancy that I found absolutely fascinating. The report lists 3 counts of criminal possession of a pistol or revolver.
This is a great catch.
Why only 3 counts when they confiscated 4 firearms? I kept rereading it thinking I missed a gun.
This is where we see the rigid mechanical definitions of the law overriding general terminology. The legal system cannot deal in approximations. It relies on strict mechanical categorization.
Okay, let's break that down.
If we recall our inventory, we had the Ruger pocket pistol, the high standard target pistol, and the Smith & Wesson duty pistol. That constitutes 3 handguns.
But the 4th weapon, the Aero Precision 9mm, it fires a handgun cartridge.
It does, but it is constructed on a rifle platform. It has a stock intended to be fired from the shoulder and a barrel length that technically removes it from the handgun classification.
So the law doesn't care that it shoots 9mm ammunition. It only cares about the physical dimensions of the hardware itself.
Exactly. The statutes governing concealed carry permits, specific prohibitions for felons, and mandatory minimums often delineate explicitly between pistols or revolvers and long guns.
By charging exactly 3 counts of that specific statute, the prosecutor is demonstrating strict adherence to the mechanical definitions of the seized property.
They're slotting each physical object into its precise corresponding legal silo.
It is an incredibly meticulous process.
Yeah.
And you see that exact same microscopic scrutiny applied to the narcotics charges. He isn't just charged broadly with drug possession.
No, the law is way more granular than that.
The charges escalate based on intent and chemistry. He is charged with possession of narcotics with intent to sell, which the law infers from the sheer volume and the presence of that $6,777 in small bills.
The intent is implied by the economics.
But then there's this incredibly specific charge: possession of a ½ ounce or more of cocaine in freebase form. When I read that, it felt less like a criminal charge and more like a line from a highly advanced organic chemistry textbook.
Well, in a court of law, the justice system essentially has to function as a chemistry textbook. The penal code is constructed around strict quantified thresholds.
Because freebase form is the legal and chemical designation for crack cocaine, right?
Yes. It differentiates it statutorily from powder cocaine hydrochloride. And the phrasing ½ ounce or more is the critical legal trigger.
Because the penalties scale up exponentially once you cross certain weight boundaries. I checked the math on this, actually. A ½ ounce is roughly 14 grams. And the inventory stated they seized 100 grams.
So seizure far exceeded the threshold. But the charging document specifically names that ½ ounce benchmark because that is the precise statutory key that unlocks the heavier mandatory sentencing guidelines.
It's all about crossing that specific mathematical line.
It demonstrates that after the kinetic chaos of the tactical raid is over, after the state police pack up and the yellow tape is taken down, the entire scene is transported to a laboratory.
The environment is basically subjected to a microscopic scientific distillation.
Exactly. The narcotics are chemically analyzed to confirm their exact molecular structure, weighed down to the fraction of a gram, and then mathematically slotted into the corresponding paragraph of the penal code.
It really hammers home the idea that reading a list of legal charges isn't just a matter of skimming through dry bureaucratic jargon. It is a profound exercise in narrative reconstruction.
This is the final piece of the puzzle.
By decoding these charges, we can literally visualize the unsecured weapons resting on the furniture. We can deduce the hidden tragic presence of children navigating that highly volatile space, and we can watch the strict, unforgiving mathematical categorizations of the law descending like a grid over an inherently chaotic scene.
The charging document acts as the essential bridge between the messy, unpredictable reality of the street and the highly organized structural logic of the courtroom. It translates physical contraband and compromised environments into a specialized language that the machinery of the justice system can actually process.
Which really brings us to the culmination of our journey today. We began by analyzing the immense logistical coordination of a multi-agency operation on a seemingly average Tuesday in Waterbury, Connecticut.
It was an incredible display of state power.
We unpacked the mechanics of how vice, intelligence, gang units, and the state police violent crime task force synchronized to dismantle a network across a fixed residence and multiple mobile stash cars.
And we examined the raw economics of the scene, exploring how the presence of both synthetic microdosed fentanyl and locally manufactured crack cocaine represents a diversified, highly volatile market.
A market that is lubricated by the exact sum of $6,777 in street-level cash flow. We broke down the mechanics of the arsenal, marveling at the tactical intentionality behind the Ruger pocket pistol, the heavy-duty Smith & Wesson, and the area denial capability of the Aero Precision Rifle.
While also grappling with the historical anomaly of the vintage high-standard target pistol.
And finally, we decoded the dense legal blueprint, revealing the unseen reality of minors in the home and the meticulous chemical and mathematical precision with which the law processes contraband.
It demonstrates the profound depth of structural, economic, and tactical information that can be extracted from what the general public would just dismiss as very brief, routine news update.
It really does completely change how you view the daily news. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, returning to that historical anomaly we uncovered.
The high-standard pistol.
Yes. Consider the hidden, untold history of those 4 firearms, specifically that high-standard .22 target pistol. Think about the journey of that object. How does a finely machined instrument, a gun designed decades ago for Olympic-level precision and quiet Sunday afternoons at a target range, eventually end up sitting unsecured next to a modern, tactical AR-style platform and 77 lethal doses of synthetic fentanyl inside a residence on Woodlawn Terrace?
It's a chilling physical history.
These seized items are not just inert pieces of evidence sitting in a sterile police locker. They are physical, enduring histories of commerce, of crime, and of complex underground circulation, all converging in one explosive moment on a single Tuesday in Waterbury. It forces you to look out your own window and wonder what other deeply hidden, incredibly complex economies are operating quietly in the neighborhoods just down the street from you.